The candles were already burning by the time I realized something had gone terribly wrong. The apartment smelled like fresh rosemary, butter, and homemade bread. The kind of meal that only gets cooked when someone believes they're about to have one of the happiest nights of their life. But as the clock crawled past 8, then 9, the silence became heavier than the music quietly playing from the kitchen speaker. My roommate stood by the window for what felt like forever, checking his phone every few minutes with a smile that slowly disappeared from his face. Then, without saying a single word, he walked to the dining table, picked up the untouched plate that had been waiting for someone else, carried it across the room, and gently placed it in front of me. In that heartbreaking moment, I realized I wasn't just watching someone get stood up. I was watching a good man quietly bury another piece of his hope. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances, and if stories about hope and healing inspire you, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows more heartfelt stories like this to reach people who may need them the most. When I first met Ethan, I assumed we would barely tolerate each other. We had answered the same apartment listing after graduating from different colleges in the same city. I was quiet, buried in work as a junior architect trying to prove myself. Ethan worked as a pediatric nurse, constantly exhausted after 12-hour shifts but somehow always smiling. The first thing he ever carried into the apartment wasn't a television or expensive furniture. It was a collection of small potted plants that he arranged carefully on the balcony, saying they deserved sunlight after spending weeks inside a moving truck. Living with him slowly changed the atmosphere of the apartment. He remembered birthdays that everyone else forgot. He left encouraging notes beside my coffee mug before important presentations. He baked cookies for neighbors we had never even spoken to. Whenever life disappointed him, he somehow found another reason to stay kind instead of becoming bitter. Watching him live made me wonder whether some people were simply born with hearts larger than everyone else's. A few months after moving in together, Ethan told me about someone named Claire. They had met through a community volunteer event where both had spent weekends serving meals at a homeless shelter. Unlike the dating stories filled with games and confusion that I usually heard from coworkers, this one sounded peaceful. They spent weeks getting to know each other through long walks, bookstores, and coffee shops instead of expensive restaurants. Every time Ethan returned from seeing her, he looked lighter, as if life itself had become easier to carry. As weeks became months, I watched him slowly fall in love. He never rushed anything. Instead, he admired the small details. He talked about how she always noticed lonely people sitting by themselves. He loved how she laughed with her entire face instead of trying to look perfect. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan seemed to believe his future was beginning to take shape. Then came the dinner. He spent nearly an entire Saturday preparing it. He searched through recipes online for days before finally deciding to recreate a meal Claire had once mentioned her grandmother used to make. He visited 3 grocery stores looking for fresh ingredients. He polished the silverware until it reflected the kitchen lights. He even bought fresh flowers despite insisting flowers were overpriced. Looking around our apartment that evening felt like stepping into someone's dream. At 6:30, he changed into a navy blue shirt I had never seen before. At 6:50, he straightened the tablecloth for the 10th time. At 7, he smiled every time headlights passed outside our building. 7:30 came. 8 o'clock followed. Every vibration of his phone made his eyes brighten before fading again. Eventually, a single message arrived. She wasn't coming. There was no emergency. No explanation worth remembering. Only a brief apology saying she wasn't ready for something serious and thought it would be better to end things before they became complicated. I expected anger. I expected tears. Instead, Ethan quietly stared at the message for several minutes before carrying her untouched dinner to my side of the table. He smiled weakly and admitted that good food shouldn't go to waste. That meal became one of the quietest dinners of my life. Neither of us mentioned Claire again that night. Life continued, but something inside Ethan changed. He still smiled at patience. He still watered the plants every morning. He still baked cookies for neighbors. Yet there was now a hesitation before every act of optimism. as though disappointment had taught him to protect himself from expecting too much. Months passed. Meanwhile, my own career began collapsing beneath impossible deadlines. The architecture firm where I worked announced layoffs after losing several major projects. Everyone competed against one another to keep their jobs. Friendships disappeared overnight. Stress invaded every corner of my life until I barely recognized myself. One rainy Thursday, I came home carrying a cardboard box filled with my office belongings. I had been laid off. I sat on the couch, unable to speak. Without asking questions, Ethan disappeared into the kitchen. Half an hour later, he returned with tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and 2 bowls of vanilla ice cream. He never pretended food could solve unemployment. Instead, he reminded me that losing one job didn't mean losing my value as a person. Over the next several weeks, he quietly became my greatest supporter. While I searched for interviews, he secretly contacted former coworkers, updated my resume, and even convinced one of his hospital friends whose husband owned a design company to review my portfolio. Because of him, I found another opportunity. Because of him, I started believing in myself again. Only then did I understand something heartbreaking. The man whose heart had been abandoned still refused to abandon anyone else. One Sunday afternoon, I found him sitting alone on our balcony, staring at the city skyline. For the first time, he admitted he sometimes wondered whether there was simply something missing inside him that made people leave. Hearing those words hurt more than I expected. I wanted to tell him life wasn't fair. I wanted to promise someone better would arrive. Instead, I reminded him of every child whose hospital stay became less frightening because of him. Every elderly neighbor who smiled because of his kindness. Every difficult season he had helped me survive. Some people spend their entire lives searching for extraordinary people while completely overlooking the extraordinary person already standing beside them. Those words lingered with both of us. Winter arrived. One snowy evening, there was a knock at our apartment door. Standing outside was an elderly woman carrying 2 containers of homemade lasagna. She introduced herself as Mrs. Harper from the apartment downstairs. Months earlier, Ethan had found her unconscious in the laundry room after she suffered dangerously low blood sugar while living alone. He had stayed beside her until the ambulance arrived, visited her during recovery, and secretly continued delivering groceries whenever she struggled with heavy bags. She had discovered this only because another neighbor accidentally mentioned it. She thanked him through tears. Then she told him something unexpected. Her granddaughter had recently moved back to town after finishing graduate school. She volunteered at the same children's hospital where Ethan worked. Her name was Lily. Unlike dramatic movie moments, nothing magical happened immediately. No instant romance. No cinematic music. Just 2 genuinely kind people meeting over coffee because someone believed they deserved to know each other. Weeks turned into months. Their relationship grew slowly through ordinary moments. Grocery shopping together, walking rescue dogs at local shelters, reading books in the same room without speaking, supporting each other's exhausting work schedules. The difference wasn't grand gestures. It was consistency. Lily arrived when she said she would. She remembered little promises. She celebrated Ethan's victories and sat quietly beside him during difficult days. Watching them together felt completely different from what had happened before. This relationship wasn't fueled by excitement alone. It was built on trust. Nearly a year after the unforgettable dinner, Ethan invited me home early from work. As I entered the apartment, I froze. The dining table looked exactly as it had that heartbreaking evening. Fresh flowers, candles, homemade bread, the same recipes. For one terrifying second, I feared history was repeating itself. Then Ethan laughed. This time there were 3 plates instead of 2. Lily arrived carrying dessert. She smiled at the table and admitted Ethan had recreated the dinner he once never got to share because he believed painful memories deserved beautiful endings instead of permanent sadness. As we ate together, nobody ignored what had happened a year earlier. Instead, they honored it. Because without that painful night, Ethan would never have learned that rejection doesn't define someone's worth. Without that heartbreak, he might never have met Lily. Without that disappointment, I might never have understood what true friendship actually looked like. Looking around the table, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't romance at all. Sometimes it's the friend who quietly moves a forgotten plate in front of you so neither of you has to eat alone. Years later, I attended Ethan and Lily's wedding. Mrs. Harper cried through nearly the entire ceremony. The hospital staff filled half the church. Several former patients, now healthy teenagers, stood proudly among the guests. When Ethan thanked everyone for believing in him, he never mentioned the woman who hadn't shown up. He only spoke about the people who had. That simple choice revealed everything about the man he had always been. Life will disappoint us. Plans will collapse. People we trust may walk away without explanation. But kindness never becomes wasted simply because the wrong person failed to appreciate it. Eventually, someone else will. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next month. But someday the goodness you've continued giving to the world finds its way back in forms you never expected. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who may need hope today, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be silently carrying heartbreak of their own. Special request. Before this story ends, please leave a comment telling us about one person whose kindness changed your life. Your words might become the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. As I think back to that unforgettable evening, I no longer remember the empty chair first. I remember the quiet courage of a man who refused to let disappointment turn him into someone cold. I remember the warmth of candlelight reflecting across two plates instead of one. I remember discovering that friendship sometimes arrives disguised as an ordinary dinner shared after someone else's absence. Most of all, I remember learning that broken evenings do not always become broken lives. Sometimes they become the first chapter of a future far more beautiful than the one we originally imagined, proving that hope has an extraordinary way of returning to those who never stop setting an extra place at the table for kindness.